Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre blasted Liberal Minister Mark Holland about his recent comments surrounding Canadians taking summer road trips. The Alberta government announced a huge funding boost supporting seniors lodge providers in our province. And Lethbridge Police welcomed a new four-legged friend, which will help those who've been victims of crime.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government has finalized a new air rescue contract. Government officials say the province signed a 10-year deal with Shock Trauma Air Rescue Services, otherwise known as STARS. Officials say the new deal will ensure emergency medical services will remain available across the province. STARS has been vital, especially for those who live in rural and remote communities.
They have the fleet, personnel, and medical expertise we need to optimize response times and improve patient outcomes in places where access to healthcare services is limited. Our government believes that every Albertan deserves access to the very best quality healthcare, no matter where they are in our province. This collaboration with STARS will help us to deliver exactly that by extending our reach to the remotest corners of Alberta and beyond, so that Albertans can always rely on access to the best emergency services.
STARS operates its own dispatch centre, the Emergency Link Centre, based at the Calgary International Airport, which dispatches helicopter ambulance flights throughout the province. Seniors lodge providers will be receiving some much-needed funding. Alberta Seniors Minister Jason Nixon says $60 million will go to support our province's Lodge Assistance Program. That's a $20 million increase from last year's budget.
This funding will help cover the additional operating costs to ensure seniors lodge operators have the funding needed to provide their services to low-income seniors. And given the rising costs of living and inflation, this is an increase that is needed. Our providers are seeing the same challenges that each and every one of us is seeing because of the inflationary situation as the cost of everything goes up. This funding is a 55% increase per person per day to our lodge program. It's a significant number. And I hope that our lodge operators see that we hear the challenges that they're facing and continue to value their partnership and want to partner with them going forward to be able to create the homes that we need for seniors across this province.
Over $22 million is being invested by the province to help foster, kinship, and other caregivers for youth in government care. Children and Family Services Minister Cyril Turton says these funds will help provide stable and loving homes for vulnerable children and youth who need a safe place to stay.
This is going to mean that an immediate 4.2% increase in funding for those caregivers will take effect beginning of June, with additional increases in the future. And we know that this was the largest ask by foster caregivers throughout the entire province when I've met with them as I've been traveling around. Lethbridge specifically, there are 36 approved and licensed foster care providers, and they care for about 63 children and youth. In the South region, in southern Alberta, there's approximately 1,500 approved and licensed foster care providers, and they serve approximately 3,000 children and youth.
Turton also says there's still a need for more families to become involved in the foster care program. Lethbridge police are looking for a missing teenage girl. 17-year-old Zara Big Swallow was last seen on June 2nd at 2nd Avenue North in Lethbridge. She's described as Indigenous, around 5'10" and 190 pounds. She was last seen wearing a dark hoodie, black jeans, white shirt, and turquoise and white sneakers. If you've seen Big Swallow, please call Lethbridge Police Service right away at 403-328-4444. Lethbridge Police Service welcomed its newest facility dog, which joins the Victim and Witness Services Unit. Officials say it can cost upwards of $40,000 to train a support dog in Victim and Witness Services. DWW Cruiser is a specially trained 4-year-old black lab, which will be working with victims primarily in a courthouse setting. Cruiser received extensive training by an organization called Dogs with Wings, but will be eased into its role by LPS staff. As Catherine Pooley, Victim Witness Services Program Manager, explains, the onboarding of Cruiser is kind of like that of a human employee.
We want to give them a little bit of adjustment time, just like any person on a new job. They would have a little bit of training and adjustment time to learn the role in front of them. We're going to give Cruiser the same time to get to know his people, to get to know the service, and then to start practicing some of the direct service. So we'll go over to the courthouse, spend a bit of time training there. We'll do some training here, potentially over at the Child Advocacy Center. We want to make this a really collaborative approach so that the needs of our community are being met.
Police says support dogs can help victims stay grounded in the very stressful process of testifying in court. Cruiser is the second dog with the unit. DWW Court is another dog which has also been helping with staff members' wellness at the Lethbridge Police Service. Officials with the Lethbridge wastewater treatment plant took Bridge City News on a very special tour of their facility. Officials offered some insight into the process of recycling wastewater, along with steps you can take to maintain the environment. BCN's Landon Hickok has the details.
At the plant, approximately 30 million liters of raw sewage through 45,000 households get shipped to the plant. The first step is the removal of any solid debris and grit through screening. It then runs through these circular holding tanks in a process known as primary clarification, where the water settles and sludge is filtered out. The process is done again after it's fed to these bioreactor tanks. Here in each of these tanks, varying oxygen levels causes bacteria to remove carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Final Clarifiers pumps out high levels of bacteria and goes through ultraviolet disinfection before finally being discharged through the Old Man River. Some of the benefits to come out of treating wastewater are specifically aimed at maintaining the environment around. By decreasing water pollution, it maintains the fish population in the river, it's safe for recreational sports such as kayaking in the river, and it brings benefits to farming as well.
When the solids that are being removed from the wastewater in the form of the bacteria that eats up all the pollution, as well as what settles out in the primaries, go to anaerobic digesters, and that sludge ultimately gets land applied in the region to farmers' fields as nutrients for their crops.
Another thing officials are stressing about is what you can and cannot flush down the toilet.
One of the things that the wastewater industry as a whole is frustrated with is our wipes with the word flushable on the container. They might be flushable enough to make it down the toilet, but they don't break down, and they do get hung up in the collection pipe network.
For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre responded to the recent outburst from Health Minister Mark Holland in question period. Holland blasted Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas, who says the Liberals really need to support the Tory motion of eliminating the carbon tax on fuel until Labor Day so families can go on road trips this summer. Holland says Canadians can drive in their vehicles for 10 hours a day for 10 days and watch the planet burn. Poilievre took a little issue with that.
Last week, the health minister went into a wacko rant accusing parents who take their kids on a road trip of locking them up in a car for 10 days straight without a washroom break, causing the whole world to burn. Unbelievable. All because we proposed that the government take taxes off gas so that Canadians could have a summer break. Will this health minister break into the same hysteria over his boss's use of a gas-guzzling private jet to vacation all around the world?
We face an existential crisis in climate change. The Conservative solution, you'd have to drive. I was wrong, and I admit it. It wasn't 37,000 kilometers. It was 44,000 kilometers to get the benefit that they're talking about. And what they want to do is cut not only dental care, not only cut child care, not only cut pharmacare, but end our climate action and return to the days when the Conservative Party would go into climate conferences and attack the action the world was taking to save our planet. I will stand for climate change, and so will this party, Mr. Speaker.
Industry Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne says he looked into the NDP's call for a price cap on some groceries, but doesn't think it's a very good idea. New Democrats say a price cap, like some European countries have, should be the next step if the government cannot convince grocers to bring down prices themselves. Champagne, however, thinks it's better to keep putting pressure on grocers and on manufacturers to try and bring more competition into the grocery industry. The reports the parliamentary budget officer says the Trudeau government put a gag order on him to not talk about research showing most Canadians pay more than what they get back when it comes to the federal carbon tax. Political reporter Brian Lilly has the details.
They have told the PBO, we'll let you see this report, but you can't talk about it. So good on him for actually saying the government has its own research. It will not publish it. It will not make it public. And it's told me I can't talk about it. But yes, you are going to pay more than what you get back. And I'm trying to remember for all the various income brackets, but an Alberta family that is, middle class, upper middle class, could be paying $2,500 a year more in carbon taxes and all the add-ons than they get back in rebates. So, that's not an insignificant amount.
Mr. Lilly will also discuss a new report outlining how the Trudeau government was too slow to react to foreign interference and that some MPs knowingly took part in that foreign interference. He'll have details coming up in the second half of our program. A pro-Palestinian rally took place the morning of the University of Toronto's convocation ceremony. A number of Jewish and pro-Israel groups say the recent encampment has dampened the celebrations, making some students feel unsafe.
We continue to call on the U of T administration to show leadership and send a clear message that a hateful, anti-Jewish occupation of the campus will not be tolerated. This hate fest has gone on for far too long, and it is past time for those engaged in shouting anti-Semitic slogans or harassing and abusing Jewish students to be held accountable for their actions. The concerns of Jewish faculty, staff, and students must be heard. The Jewish community's perspective must be part of the public record through this process.
Every Israeli bomb and every Palestinian death may be linked to us here in North America. Here in Canada, in Toronto, at this university, we're complicit in the mass murder of our colleagues and classmates. Grief, of course, is inescapable, but we must now honor the dead and commit to the living.
The World Central Kitchen says it has now surpassed providing 50 million meals for people in the Gaza region. Spokesperson Linda Roth says they've had their fair share of challenges feeding those in need as the war between Israel and Hamas continues.
As many of you know, we had to pause our work in Gaza after the Israeli attack on our personnel convoy on April 1st, which killed 7 of our colleagues. Jose, our founder, says the decision to restart feeding in Gaza was both the hardest and the simplest one we could make. Right now, we have 2 main World Central kitchens in operation in Gaza and another 65 community kitchens spread throughout the Strip. We have about 400 Palestinian Response Corps members and hundreds of more volunteers that are working to feed everyone in Gaza. It's Palestinians feeding Palestinians.
The Israeli military confirmed the deaths of 4 more hostages that were held by Hamas. 3 were men who were 80 years of age or older. Looking weak and weary, they appeared in a video last December that was released by the terrorist group Hamas.
Today we shared the devastating news with the families of 85-year-old Amiram Cooper, one of the founders of Kibbutz Nir Oz, 80-year-old Chaim Perry from Kibbutz Nir Oz, 80-year-old Yoram Metzger from Kibbutz Nir Oz, and 51-year-old Israeli and British citizen Dolev Yahoud from Kibbutz Nadav Popelwell from Kibbutz Nirim. That their loved ones were killed a few months ago during Hamas captivity in Gaza, and their bodies are still being held by Hamas. We assess that the 4 of them were killed while together in the area of Khan Yunis during our operation there against Hamas. The information we confirmed by the relevant bodies after assessing new intelligence that we gathered over the last few weeks.
Not only is Israel battling Hamas, but also another Iran-funded terrorist group known as Hezbollah. TBN Israeli correspondent Yair Pinto says the threat from Hezbollah in Lebanon is real and could escalate into a major war.
But if this becomes a full-on war, and if the IDF starts maneuvering into Lebanon, this can ignite the entire Middle East and can involve the United States, it can involve Russia, it can involve Iran and other regional players that will cause the whole world to get drawn into this region.
The country of Mexico has a new president. Claudia Sheinbaum is a physicist with a doctorate in energy engineering. She's also the former mayor of Mexico City and was part of the United Nations panel of climate scientists who received a Nobel Peace Prize. She also became the first woman and first of Jewish heritage to be elected president of Mexico. Sheinbaum won with around 60% of the vote in the largest election in Mexico's history. The 61-year-old is set to replace the outgoing president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who was her longtime ally. His social welfare programs lifted many Mexicans out of poverty, making their leftist Morena party a favorite among many voters. Well, closer to home, Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final begins Saturday in South Beach as the Florida Panthers take on the Edmonton Oilers. A Canadian team has not won the Stanley Cup since the Montreal Canadiens did so back in 1993. For many Oilers fans, optimism runs high in Edmonton, and the fact that the Oilers may finally end this drought.
Until Saturday, Game 1, I think we're going to be feeling pretty good. Honestly, just been smiling all day. Like it's been crazy because it's been 18 years since we've been to this point. You know, been through a lot over the last 10, 15 years as an Oilers fan. And so, you know, I was at the game last night, being able to experience all the energy in the city, how excited everybody is. I think it's going to be really good. You know, as we've been saying the last few years, if they get the saves that they need, if they can score the goals at the right time, and if their penalty kill can be as good as they've been, I think they have a pretty good shot.
Hopefully Edmonton will bring the cup back home to Canada. It's been a long time. Well, we enjoy lots of sunshine again today in Lethbridge, and that trend should continue for the remainder of the week. Full weather details are coming up. Well, we enjoyed a few clouds and lots of wind once again today across much of southwestern Alberta. Tonight, expect to see lots of stars with a mainly clear sky and a low near 9 degrees. Wednesday, a clear sky once again with a high near 20. Thursday, sunshine with a high near 24. Sunny and 25 degrees for Friday. Even hotter on the weekend. Expect sunshine and 27 degrees for Saturday. Sunny and 28 for Sunday. Beautiful. Monday, cooling off slightly, but still a very warm 26 degrees. Now, the average high for this time of year is 21 degrees with an average low of 7. The record high for this day was 35 set back in 1970, and the record low was a chilly +1 set back in 1944. The sun rose at 5:26 and will set at 9:34. Let's see how Wednesday is shaping up across our home and native land now. Expect a few clouds with a high of 18 degrees in Victoria, BC, clearing at 17 for Vancouver. It should be mainly sunny and 18 degrees in Edmonton. A clear sky and 18 degrees as well for Calgary on Wednesday. Just a few clouds and 17 degrees is on tap for Regina. A mixture of sun and clouds, and 16 for Saskatoon. A 30% chance of showers developing, and a high of 18 degrees for Winnipeg on Wednesday. In the central part of the country, expect thunder showers and a high of 26 in Toronto. Mainly sunny and 32 degrees for Ottawa. Expect a mixture of sun and cloud and 32 as well for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, there's a 30% chance of showers developing with a high near 26 for Fredericton. Mainly sunny and 23 degrees in Halifax. Cloudy and 15 in Charlottetown. And in St. John's, expect rain mixed with drizzle and a high of only 10 degrees on Wednesday. The Bank of Canada will announce its latest interest rate decision on Wednesday amid speculation that the central bank might start to cut rates. Now, if the Bank of Canada opts to lower rates, it would mark the first time since March of 2020. That's when the COVID-19 pandemic prompted the central bank to slash its key interest rate to almost zero. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem says a rate cut is within the realm of possibilities, but that the decision will be guided by economic data. He says the central bank is seeing what it needs to see, but that progress towards price stability will need to be sustained. Some regions of the country are seeing much more growth than others, especially here in Alberta. According to the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge, Trevor Lewington, the Windy City has been seeing steady job growth.
We've actually seen a very significant increase. So if we go back a year ago to April of last year, there were about 68,000 people employed in the census metropolitan area in Lethbridge. That number's risen by almost 9,000. So there's 77,000 people working now. That's a pretty strong job growth, and the size of our workforce has grown to match. So that's good news. The unemployment rate fell to 6.4% in April, which was down slightly from March. And that's actually the first time we've seen that number pushed down since November. So very encouraging signs for sure.
Mr. Lewington will have more on our local economy in an interview with BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Online streaming services must now begin contributing money towards local news and the production of Canadian content. The CRTC is directing Netflix, Spotify, and other foreign streamers to pay 5% of their annual Canadian revenue into a fund. The agency expects the fund will inject around $200 million into Canada's broadcasting system each and every year. It'll be devoted to producing local TV and radio news, Indigenous content, and French language content. The chairman of Toyota is apologizing for massive cheating on certification tests for 7 of the automaker's models. The faulty testing at Japan's top automaker involved used outdated data and collision tests, along with the incorrect testing of airbag inflation and information from seat damage in crashes. Toyota officials say they have stopped production on 3 models made in Japan, including the Corolla Fielder, Corolla Axio, and the Yaris Cross. The latest problems are not related to Toyota's overseas production. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 138 points on the day to finish at 21,978. The Dow was up 140 points to 38,711. The S&P 500 was up 7 points to 5291, and the Nasdaq was up 28 points to finish at 16,857. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.24 to $72.97 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 13 cents to $2.62 US. Gold was down $23.74 to $23.2701 US an ounce, and silver was down $1.24 to $29.50 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.66 per bushel, barley is at $6.42, canola is at $14.22, and corn is at $7.82 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.30 to $181.60. Feeder cattle August contract was down 18 cents to $256.03, and lean hogs June contract was up $1.98 to $101.68. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.11 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Seniors Lodge providers will be receiving more funding here in Alberta. Our province's Seniors Minister, Jason Nixon, says $60 million will go to support our province's Lodge Assistance Program. That's a $20 million increase from last year's budget. The Parliamentary Budget Officer is not happy, and now he's speaking out. Yves Giroux says the Trudeau government put a gag order on him, so he couldn't talk about his research showing that Canadians pay more in carbon tax than what they receive in rebates. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have more details for us momentarily. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. A bombshell from the Parliamentary Budget Officer. He says the Trudeau government put a gag order on him not to talk about research showing most Canadians pay more than what they get back when it comes to the federal carbon tax. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, the PBO confirmed a while ago what many of us already suspected, that we're actually paying more than what we're getting back.
He did. And if you've watched Question Period or watched the news elsewhere, then you might be a little bit confused, because the Liberals always point to one report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer that says, oh no, you get back more than you pay. And the Conservatives always point to another one that says, no, you pay more than you get back. And here's the difference, Hal. The first report just looked at purely the carbon tax. You know, do you get back more than you pay? And he said, okay, based on government calculations, yes. And then it was raised. Well, what about the add-on effects? And so the Parliamentary Budget Officer went and did another report and looked at, well, okay, you add the carbon tax on and the price of food goes up, the price of clothing goes up, anything moving by truck goes up, anything moving by train goes up, all these things. And then there's the added HST on all of this. And in that report, he said, yes, you most people will pay more than they get back, except for people at the very lowest income brackets. And so the Liberals will never acknowledge that second report. And then at a committee meeting on Monday, the PBO, Yves Giroux, was asked a question by Liberal MP Ryan Turnbull, and kind of surprised everyone because he alluded to the fact that there was this report by Environment and Climate Change Canada that confirmed what he said. Yes, most of us are paying more than we get back when you add everything up, when you compound all the changes that happen because of the carbon tax. The government's own research says that, but they told him not to talk about it. In comes Conservative MP Marty Morantz, who says, well, wait a minute, a little while ago, you mentioned this. Yes, this report exists, we found it, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. Well, can you tell us what it says? It says what my report says. And of course, the Trudeau government has been fighting this report. So yes, they have told the PBO, we'll let you see this report, but you can't talk about it. So good on him for actually saying the government has its own research. It will not publish it. It will not make it public. And it's told me I can't talk about it. But yes, you are going to pay more than what you get back. And I'm trying to remember for all the various income brackets, but an Alberta family that is, middle class, upper middle class, could be paying $2,500 a year more in carbon taxes and all the add-ons than they get back in rebates. So, I mean, that's not an insignificant amount. That's a great family vacation. That's an add-on to your deck. That's, different things that we could all do with that money that we can't do because we're paying it to the government.
Now, speaking of family vacations, let's talk a bit about the bizarre outburst by Health Minister Mark Holland, who described summer road trips like they were prisons and that family vacations burn the planet. Now, we have the clip here on Bridge City News. A lot of our viewers were stunned when they saw this. Brian, the comments by Holland some say, were pretty extremist.
I called them unhinged in a column in the Toronto Sun. I mean, he's describing a summer family road trip vacation. By the way, let me just set this up. This all started, if you played the clip, this all started with Rachel Thomas, Conservative MP from your region, talking about a Conservative motion to take the taxes off of gas, give people a rebate between now and Labor Day so that they can afford a summer road trip. And Holland starts going on about how, well, you're going to be in the car for 10 days and 10 hours a day and no bathroom breaks, and it's going to be horrible. Did he grow up with Clark Griswold from National Lampoon's Vacation? Did he have the worst summer road trips ever? Thomas was asking about, being able to go see a national park or visit a family. And he goes off on how horrible road trips are, and it's going to be bad, kids, but don't worry, you'll pay for it by giving up the future of the planet because the planet will burn. What on earth is he talking about? Now, the Liberals are trying to claim that the Conservative math is off on how much people will save with their proposal. He didn't talk about that. He didn't mention that. He just went off on an unhinged rant, and he didn't raise it once but twice in that question period last week. And now Stephen Guilbeault is out trying to do cleanup for Mark Holland, the health minister. And I'm not sure that that's any better because nobody believes Stephen Guilbeault. And people are bringing up old posts to social media from Justin Trudeau about road trips with his family for vacations and how great they are. And here are the Liberals just sounding completely disconnected by denigrating the idea that you're going to do a road trip. You know what I did on the weekend, Hal? I did a road trip to Lake Erie. You'd lived down here in Southern Ontario for a while. I went to Lake Erie, did some camping. I paid for the campsite, unlike the people at different campuses. I paid for the campsite, hung out at Turkey Point, got back to nature. It's refreshing. It's rejuvenating. It's as Canadian as maple syrup. And here the Liberals are denigrating it. Out of touch.
I remember the many trips down to Crystal Beach, right? It's just a beautiful area.
Oh, one of my favorite spots.
So now, Brian, a report by a panel of MPs says the Trudeau government was a little too slow to react to foreign interference, and that some MPs actually and knowingly took part in the foreign interference. So what was the government's response to this?
The response was unreal. So here's what the report said. This is from the NSICOP, it's called. This is the committee of MPs that the government has been talking up for more than a year, saying, NSICOP will look after this. NSICOP has the resources. NSICOP is the place to do this. They have the security clearance and they know what's happening. Well, this is the second report in 2 weeks that reveals new information that we didn't hear at the public inquiry, that we didn't hear from parliamentary committees, that we didn't hear from David Johnson's whitewash report into foreign interference. And this one says that, as you mentioned, some MPs either wittingly or unwittingly took part in foreign interference, that they accepted volunteers or funds or some sort of help from foreign governments, mainly China, but also India. This is a report that says that China and India both tried to interfere in the conservative leadership elections, leadership races, the last couple of them. But it also talks about the fact that there were MPs who went and gave information to foreign governments about their own fellow MPs and their views on those foreign governments, knowing that those foreign governments would then turn around and use that information to try and pressure the MP who was opposed to China or was opposed to India, et cetera. I mean, that's essentially MPs spying on each other. That's horrific. This should not be happening. And the government's response was, well, we need caveats on this. Look, they didn't have all the information. This is the government's response on everything, Hal. They, whether it's NSICOP and CIRA, the Hogue Commission, the parliamentary committees, well, they don't have all the information. We are coming on 2 years of dealing with this idea of massive foreign interference in our elections. And the Trudeau government keeps saying, well, nobody has all the information. We do, but nobody else does. Well, why doesn't anybody else have this? And when the report also said that the government was too slow to respond, he actually denigrated the committee. This is the committee that the PM appoints. This is the committee that the PM controls. And they're trying to say that they don't have all the information, that they aren't taking into account all the things the government's done. Well, if they don't have all the information, that's on the government. This is the government that is currently fighting the Hogue Commission, the public inquiry, on whether to release more cabinet confidence documents. The Trudeau government has been dragging its feet at every turn on foreign interference, and now they've been called out by a committee chaired by one of their own, Ottawa South Liberal MP, David McGuinty. If that name sounds familiar, he's the brother of former Ontario Premier Dalton McGuinty. No question about his Liberal bona fides. This guy is a Liberal through and through and is saying this government didn't do the right thing.
Brian, the Liberals' pharmacare bill passed the House of Commons and now has made its way to the Senate. So what does this really mean for Canadians who are trying to pay for prescription drugs?
For most Canadians, nothing, sadly. But if you are in one of the two camps of people who will get some coverage, you're still a long way away. We are at June 6th, June 4th, as we sit here and talk. The Senate, it's doubtful that they're going to pass this before the summer. It could happen, but the Senate's probably going to want to take its time and go through this bill. So it either passes the Senate just by the skin of its teeth by the end of June, or the Senate doesn't pass it until later this year. What will eventually be covered? Some contraceptives, some diabetes medication. That's it. If you're on heart medication, you're not going to be covered. If you are on medication related to anxiety, that's not going to be covered. If you are on medication related to any other condition beyond diabetes or contraception, you are not going to be covered. And they're calling this universal national pharmacare. It's not. And I'm already hearing from people within the medical community who say, even on diabetes, it doesn't cover everything that's out there. So, this is the Liberals giving the NDP the bare minimum they need to keep them on side on their supply and confidence motion, their coalition agreement, until the next election, and trying to keep that election at October 2025 as opposed to moving it up sooner.
Now, speaking of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh and his party have put a proposal on the table to combat rising food prices, Brian, and it's in the form of a price cap. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, we're going back to 1970s economics, which, I'm sure many of your viewers would remember the 1970s and the economics, and others won't. Let me tell you, price controls don't work. They don't work in any country that's tried them, and that includes Canada back in the 1970s. And he's putting forward a proposal that is just going to be on the absolute basics: bananas, bread, milk. I don't know about you, Hal. I shop at all kinds of grocery stores. I don't just go to one store. But have you ever walked in and you see a sign that says, "We will not be undersold"? And what do they list? All the things that Jagmeet Singh says he wants to put a price cap on: bananas, bread, milk, butter. Like, these are the essentials. And these are the things that grocery stores, regardless of who owns them, compete the most for. It's the other items that we don't buy or use on a daily basis that end up having the biggest price jumps. And if Jagmeet Singh really wanted to deal with grocery prices increasing or inflation, he wouldn't be supporting the Trudeau government. There was a Scotiabank report a little while ago that said that the increase in Bank of Canada interest rates, that at least 200 basis points, or 2%, of that increase was due to government spending by the Trudeau Liberals. I mean, they have increased government spending tremendously. That has forced inflation up because it's, so many dollars chasing so many goods, and the government is spending beyond its means. They keep supporting this. Instead, they're focusing on an industry that has incredibly thin margins. And I know Loblaws has great profit margins. Do you know where that's from? Owning Shoppers Drug Mart and selling things like makeup. That's where their profit comes from. It's right in their annual report. All of the grocery stores, it's actually like 1% to 3% profit margin. And Jagmeet Singh wants to attack them and shrink that down to what, 0.5%? Well, at that point, the stores are going to close.
Another week and yet another poll, and this one by Leger. Brian, where do the Tories stand nationally right now, and how strong are they in Quebec?
Well, this was the big shocker. So, the national numbers were not a surprise. I believe it was 42% for the Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, and 23% for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. So that's a 19-point gap. Most of the polls have been showing 16 to 20, as high as 22% in some polls over the last few months, in terms of a gap between the Conservatives and the Liberals. But this poll, in Leger, by the way, and this was a poll done for my employer, Post Media, but Leger does a ton of polls. They worked with various media outlets. They worked with corporate clients. They've been the most accurate polling company in the last two elections. They have the Conservatives tied with the Bloc Québécois at 29% support each. The Liberals are behind them at 26%. Now, don't expect that this is going to be a huge breakthrough, that the Conservatives are going to sweep Quebec. First, we have to see, does this trend continue? This is always my advice in polling. Don't look for one poll, look for trends. If all the pollsters are starting to see a trend, okay, well, maybe there is a big change. Otherwise, it might just be an anomaly with that specific poll. And so we've seen the trend of that 15 to 16 to 22% national lead for the Conservatives. That's been there for a while. We want to see if that translates into the Conservatives leading or tied in Quebec in the future. But the Conservative support in Quebec is concentrated around Quebec City, up in the Saguenay. It's in specific regions. But the fact that they're ahead of the Liberals in Justin Trudeau's home province, or what he calls his home province. A lot of Quebecers always remind me he was born and raised in Ottawa until the age of 14, and he's really an Anglo. There's animosity towards Trudeau in Quebec. That is significant, and it shouldn't be overlooked. Will they increase the seat count if these numbers hold? Absolutely. Will they sweep the province? Probably not. But you know what? All they need to do is win in Ontario, win in BC, pick up a couple of seats in Alberta, few more in Atlantic Canada, and you've got a majority government.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Well, the summer season is quickly approaching, so how are things shaping up on the economic front over the next number of months for Lethbridge and southern Alberta? Well, joining me to discuss this in more detail is Trevor Lewington, CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Trevor. Great to have you with us once again.
Yeah, great to see you. Thanks for having me back.
Excellent. Okay, so Trevor, overall, the Lethbridge area, is unemployment up or is it down? What's going on?
Yeah, we've actually seen a very significant increase. So if we go back a year ago to April of last year, there were about 68,000 people employed in the census metropolitan area in Lethbridge. That number's risen by almost 9,000. So there's 77,000 people working now. That's a pretty strong job growth, and the size of our workforce has grown to match. So that's good news.
That is good news. That's huge.
Yeah, the unemployment rate fell to 6.4% in April, which was down slightly from March. And that's actually the first time we've seen that number pushed down since November. So very encouraging signs for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you do have some great stats available on your website. And it looks like in the first quarter of this year, there was a significant uptick in construction jobs. So what is driving that?
Yeah, we saw a 4,000 job increase from the prior month, which is very significant. I think a big driver of that is housing starts. They're up significantly versus a year ago, so that's an encouraging sign for that part of the construction sector. And then, of course, we've got very large commercial and industrial projects like the expansion of McCain Foods. That $600 million investment is actually the largest capital investment that company's ever made in their facilities, and that's happening in Lethbridge County, just right down the road. So that's great for the region and all of the trades that are involved in that project.
Yeah, no kidding. And I understand the manufacturing sector also saw some increases in jobs. So where's that coming from, Trevor?
Yeah, last month, manufacturing actually shed about 700 jobs. So we were down on a monthly basis, but that number is up 500 compared to a year ago. So manufacturing sector still very strong. And what we're seeing actually is Lethbridge beating the trend. So last year, 2023, Lethbridge region exported almost $2.2 billion worth of stuff to other places around the world. And that was an increase of 3.1%. And that happened at the same time both Edmonton and Calgary saw a reduction. So their exports actually shrank and the Lethbridge region's exports actually grew. And of course, about 2/3 of our exports from this region are in fact manufactured goods. We've got some, everything from garbage containers to jet engine parts to all kinds of finished products that are shipped out of this region. And we're very fortunate to have that diversification in our local economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you what kind of stuff that is, but there you go. Who knew? I had no idea. Thanks for that. Okay, so Trevor, there was certainly some good news for the town of Coaldale recently as well with the announcement of the new cold, which was a $222 million cold storage facility being built there. That's great news.
Yeah, it's great news. I mean, not only will it contribute a number of construction jobs in the short term, but it will add 50 new permanent, well-paying supply chain jobs once the project is complete. And of course, property taxes to the town of Coaldale once they're operational. But it's really more important when you think about Canada's premier food corridor, which stretches along Highway 3, and you think about adding new cold chain or frozen storage, really gives a lot of options to local processors, how they store and ship their products. And New Cold has a very long history of using very advanced technologies in their facilities. They operate in North America, in Europe, as well as Australia, actually. And so it's great to see a global player like them invest in our region. Tells me they understand the potential of what's going on here. And a lot of our local food processors that have frozen products can actually potentially benefit from having that new capacity in the system. So yeah, it's great all around for, of course, Coaldale, but the broader region and the food corridor itself.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense to put it right there in Coaldale, right in the heart of it all. Absolutely. Okay, so where are things at with the new Lethbridge and District Exhibition Agri-Food Hub? I know they ran into some serious financial challenges recently. So are there any signs that things are starting to trend in a bit of a better way?
Yeah, so there was a projected deficit this year for 2024 of about $6.5 million for the Lethbridge and District Exhibition. I know the staff are working real hard over there, both reducing expenses and controlling their costs, as well as trying to find new sources of revenue, of course. Part of the process, so the City of Lethbridge signed a memorandum of understanding with the district, Lethbridge and District Exhibition, And part of that involves a third-party review of their operations, hopefully to give that outside perspective on what could be done differently. And that process is just about to begin. So hopefully we'll learn some things as that report is being created. The key is really booking new events and really finding ways to utilize that impressive space. It's a world-class facility, and just the first week of May was one good example. There were 3 events held simultaneously on the very first weekend. There was the Alberta Esports Provincial Championships, there was Geek Fest, and there was also the High Level Innovation Conference. So if you were there that weekend, it was amazing to see these 3 big, well-done events in the same building. Really a lot of buzz and traffic, and we just need to do more of that to make sure we're using that great facility to its maximum potential.
Yeah, it was hustling and bustling, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Trevor, professional, scientific, and technical services saw a decline in the number of jobs. So why is that a trend there?
Yeah, so we've lost about 2,300 professional, scientific, and technical jobs over the last year. And that, of course, is very concerning to us. That sector actually nationally across Canada has seen big gains. So Lethbridge is definitely an outlier. We want to try and understand that a little bit. I personally think a part of that is the series of budget reductions we've seen at both the university and the college. Both of those institutions have seen almost a 20% reduction in funding over the last 3 to 4 years. And so, of course, that has meant headcount reductions in a lot of those scientific and professional roles. So I do think, we have an outsized or oversized public sector in Lethbridge because of our 2 institutions. And so we feel the pain of those cuts a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. And how are businesses faring now with the challenge of finding workers to fill those job vacancies? Are there any particular sectors that are seeing more labor shortages than others?
Yeah, great question. We have seen a steady decline actually in the number of job vacancies. So, just over a year ago, we were north of 6,000 jobs that were vacant. That number's closer to 4,000. So we've seen a big improvement. And job vacancies, of course, are a concern because businesses often have to either curtail their production or they, maybe reconsider expansion projects if they don't have enough staff to run. So when we do our Brighter Together business survey every fall, usually what comes to the top as one of the key concerns of business is workforce and the availability of talent. And this past fall was the first time ever that workforce was not the number one concern. So that tells me things are starting to shift and we are seeing some improvement. The vacancies for the most part in our region are the skilled trades, as well as a category called equipment operators. So these are not typically entry-level minimum wage type jobs that are difficult to fill. It's more those very skilled positions. And so, we've seen some investments from the province at Lethbridge College to add more spots in the trades. We've seen a number of micro-credentials being developed in our region. And so again, it's just working with industry to understand what are the top issues and trying to find some of those solutions.
And switching gears here to the housing market. So the prices of houses have risen quite significantly since last year. So is that good news, Trevor? And do we know what is driving those prices up?
Yeah, I think it depends a little on your perspective. It's great news if you're selling. It's not so good if you're then buying. Lethbridge was, again, a bit of an outlier. In 2023, housing prices on average in Lethbridge grew about 22%, whereas the average for the rest of Alberta was only about 12%. So Lethbridge grew almost double the pace of the rest of the province. A chunk of that is driven by population gains. So Lethbridge grew by 3.4% last year. And so in real numbers, that means we have about 4,500 new people in our region that we didn't have a year before. And so those 4,500 people have to find a place to live or to rent, right? And that's actually the fastest rate of growth we've seen since we've been tracking those numbers since 2001. At the same time, we added all of these new wonderful humans to our region. Housing starts were way down in 2023. So we dropped from about 816 in 22 down to just 243 last year. So that created a real short supply at a time when demand has never been higher. And that, of course, pushes prices up. So we've seen housing starts rebound this year. There's lots more supply being added to the market. That's really great news. But population shows no sign of slowing down. There's still a lot of movement from other provinces across all of Alberta. Alberta continues to outpace the entire country in terms of population. So I think Lethbridge will still see the pressures of that moving forward.
Yeah, I think it surely will. And with that said, Trevor, do you foresee a housing crisis happening here, kind of similar to what Calgary is going through right now?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the good news is housing starts are up, so that's important. Also, it's in the multifamily category, which is typically where most families start, whether it's an apartment or a condo or something like that. The city of Lethbridge itself is undertaking a review of the land use bylaw, and the reason that matters is, of course, making zoning and building easier, which is hopefully the outcome of that process. And a number of communities around the city within the broader region have undertaken similar activities. So it's a combination of tactics from multiple levels of government, but we need to try and make it easier to build homes. We needed to make it more affordable for people to get into them.
Absolutely. Now, can you give us an update from any of the surrounding Southern Alberta communities?
Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about Coaldale and the new Cold investment, of course. The McCain Food investment in the broader Lethbridge County region is certainly helpful. Most communities in the region are seeing the same kinds of population growth trends that Lethbridge is, which is encouraging. We know a number of communities are holding their property tax rates flat, and a few of them have even lowered their property taxes. And that's being driven by the fact that assessed values are up so much. So that's good in the sense that we have many municipalities that are in a decent financial shape, and they're able to hold their property tax rates flat, which I think is encouraging.
Yeah.
Biggest concern for the region right now, of course, I think is the potential impact of drought as we move into the summer. And if those conditions persist, this is, of course, the third consecutive year that we'll be in a drought-like situation. So that could have a real big impact on our largest sector, which, of course, is agriculture.
Yeah, that would be a little bit discouraging, that's for sure. Let's hope things turn around there. So, Trevor, how are things looking for the ag sector? Speaking of agriculture, it's been, a really dry winter, but the rain lately must be good news this spring, right?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that reservoir levels have improved dramatically. So the Old Man, the St. Mary, and the Waterton reservoirs are all three of them are at or very close to normal levels for this time of year. So that's really good news. People can actually look at that. So the city of Lethbridge has a dedicated website page on their website that talks about water conservation, but there's also a tab where you can actually go and look at the levels in the reservoirs in real time to see where we're trending. The ag sector, of course, is going to be very cautious because, as you know, the weather can change. As the joke goes, if you don't like what you see out there, just wait 5 minutes. So again, there's a forecast to be a long, dry, hot summer. That has implications, but we'll see how that unfolds. From an overall ag sector, China's forecasted to import record numbers this year, and so that's generally good news. A lot of our exports go to the Chinese market. Cattle feeders have been downsizing some of their herds to address the rising cost of feed. So hopefully that's taken some of the risk out of the system. And right now, the Canadian dollar is fairly stagnant, which is good for exports, but not so helpful if you're importing machinery and equipment. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. The biggest factor, as always, is just watching the weather and hoping that the trend continues in a positive way.
You may have touched on this a little bit earlier, but how are things looking with the supply chain that serves Southern Alberta? Is it functioning reasonably well at this point?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's a good news story that we haven't seen any of the labor disputes or strikes that we've seen on railways and in the Port of Vancouver in past years. So there are no disruptions on the horizon in terms of getting out to global markets, which is good. We haven't had any of those crazy weather events that washed out highways in BC in recent years. And even globally, sure, there's some disputed areas in the world, but overall, supply chains seem to be moving well. And from a Southern Alberta perspective, we're well served by rail with the merger of CPKC, sort of that new North American railway all-in-one network that flows right through our community. We're on the Canamex corridor. Alberta's only 24/7 commercial crossing is at Coots, just an hour south. So we have all of the right infrastructure. And so far, all the trends seem to be positive that things are moving well across all modes around the world.
That's fantastic. Okay, so what are your thoughts on where Lethbridge, our economy, is headed over the next 6 months, Trevor?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think people are very concerned about affordability. Of course, inflation is still a thing. We've seen inflation slow, but it's still higher than what the Bank of Canada would normally target. Interest rates have been sticky as well. There are some forecasted reductions for the rest of the year, but I don't think the Bank of Canada is going to move very far. We might see a quarter point. Again, if people were expecting interest rates to drop massively anytime soon, I don't think that's going to happen. And although things are moving well today, geopolitical concerns, things like the Middle East and Ukraine, as we all know, those disputes can boil over and become very different very quickly. I think from a local perspective, as we look forward to the US election in the fall, that has real implications regardless of who sits in the Oval Office. Canada's free trade agreement with the US and Mexico comes up for review next year, and both the Democrats and Republicans have equally said they want to see changes. So trade negotiations, I think, are going to be top of mind for government as we head into the new year. But overall, economy looks strong. Again, we're blessed to have a very diversified local economy, and so far conditions seem to be good for our key sectors like agriculture. So I'm fairly optimistic for the balance of the year.
Great. Trevor, thanks so much for being with us today. Really appreciate having you on as always.
Great to be with you.
Trevor Lewington is the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.